Hello everybody, Rick Malero here. Welcome to the Real Estate Money Show. And today we're actually concluding one of our series about affordable housing through modular and ground up construction. And I wanted to finish with a big bang. So today I have a good friend and business partner. We've done a lot of business together and he is an expert in the industry. We're going to unpack that in more detail today. I'm here with my friend Jim. Jim, say hello.
Hello.
One of the things that we've talked about throughout all of this content is that number one, there's a major need in the marketplace for affordable housing. And there are ways that we can be strategic about creating opportunities that will give us these great opportunities for returns, but also where we're helping in the marketplace by providing the needed product in the marketplace. That being said, there's a lot of potential pitfalls. And so I figured, why not bring an expert to the industry that's been doing this for over 40 years? And so for those that don't know, Jim and I have been going back for several years. He rescued us from some crazy projects that I'm sure we'll talk about today. But with his 40 years of experience, he's built all kinds of projects from traditional homes to luxury properties to commercial properties, and we'll get into that today. And so without further ado, Jim, I know that you've been doing this for a very long time and you've kind of covered the whole gamut. But one thing that most people may not know is, how did you even get started?
Initially, I started off in the plumbing, mechanical construction business, did that for several years, then went off into general construction and started developing residential and multifamily. And continued that throughout decades to getting involved in residential, commercial, institutional construction, school construction. So I covered, major custom homes, mansions of all different sizes in different states. So it's just been an amazing journey over 40 years.
That's amazing. So you really started. So that was the industry you began. Like, how did that open up the doors for everything else?
The fact that I was doing plumbing and mechanical in the early days, I was engaged in all of these construction projects, whether they've been residential or commercial. So I was already had that drive in me to be part of the project, but it was only a small part. The ultimate goal was, in my mindset, was to take that further and become that general contractor. And actually, at one point, it was a multi-trade where we did design build projects, and that kind of faded itself out. Then we just went to plan and spec. But the ultimate goal was to become the general contractor. So we had controls of the entire project. The success of any construction project is how you manage the project. When you come in certain parts of it, you have to match up with other trades that are on there and run concurrent with them. But as you are a general contractor, it gives you total control of the project from start to finish of all trades.
That's interesting. So you went from being a part of like the cog in the wheel to then ultimately running and orchestrating everything else.
Exactly, and that led off then to the point where we're doing all of our own site work. We're doing our own paving. It just continued to blossom around and focus around every bit of the trade of that project from ground up. Whether it been ground design, which is infrastructure, then construction for vertical construction. It was all aspects of the project.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm sure you've got some interesting stories there.
Absolutely.
So Jim, speaking of that, obviously in all these years that you've been doing this, I am certain that you've got some war stories. And the reason why I know that is because some of them are with me. And we've been through a few
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, right? But for a lot of investors, before they get into like the exciting part, I like to tell people that we have to be aware, right? It's not about necessarily being perfect, but it's about fully understanding that there are risks. How do we mitigate those risks? And so what I'd like to do today in this interview is beginning with maybe picking in your mind, like, what is one of those crazy war stories that you were a part of, that you had to kind of go in there and firefight and solve the issues so that people get a picture of how bad things can actually get if you have the wrong team?
What I have found over the decades of being in this industry is that whether the client or investor, they rely upon the contractor. The contractor is obviously engaged to build this project, and the client investor has the idea that everything should just go right. And not really take the initiative early on to know a lot more about the contractor, the scopes of the work, and the project. And because of that happening, we've had so many that we got involved on rescue recovery where contractors went out of business. And if you say, well, okay, if we went out of business, you just reissue a permit, you move on. Let me tell you, there are horror stories to that, because in many cases, there are failed inspections. You have incomplete work not done that was scheduled to be completed, was never installed. An example of one, I had a home that was sitting for 2 years for an investor. Got involved to finish the project, went to get our finals, find out the septic system that was put in by a third party was not finalized, which is an inspection. Turns out to be when I call that contractor, the contractor was never paid, so he refused to do it. After our team getting involved to try to solve this problem, to find out that now they went from conventional systems to ATU, so that system had to be ripped out, ended up costing this investor $22,000.
That's painful.
So, and there's many stories, whether it be through construction rip-outs, having to take roofs back off, HVAC system violations, all of this that have happened. And the ultimate goal is that making sure that your contracts have breakdowns, schedule of values, and the fact that the work is being done, and more importantly, that these trades or vendors are being paid through this process, because that's what begins this horror story. Because these contractors will go from one job to another, and the horror stories just keep becoming multiplied, and some worse than others.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we've seen some of those, obviously, even from my perspective. In fact, I think that's how we ultimately got connected is, we were working with a builder. He had very, very cheap prices, and we had already built a few homes that they accomplished successfully. Maybe not the same quality. That should have been my first red flag. The quality wasn't 100% there. But I remember he kept saying, we can take more, we can take more. And so we hit the gas, we scaled this guy, and then he goes bankrupt, right? And again, part of that was we thought we could trust him. We thought he was good steward with a few deals, but his systems weren't in place. So when we scaled him, we just scaled chaos, which ultimately led to his demise. Maybe you can chime in a little bit on that part, because obviously you saw how everything unfolded too.
That is the typical of what's happened to you in those projects and that contractor. Actually, there were two contractors in your case that it's happened. Is that those contractors were looking at the contract. They were looking at the value of that contract. They were looking at the fact they'd have payments coming out of this project, but not taking into consideration of the project itself. And there's where the problem comes. In initiating the initial contract with any contractor, it's got to be more than just the price. And there's got to be that you can solidify this contractor, complete the project, make sure that it's managed, make sure that work is getting completed. As such as in some of your contracts, there were unfortunately work that was funded that was never completed, or incomplete, or not done right, that had to be ripped out and walls ripped open in some cases to make these corrections. Making sure you're dealing with the right contractor, making sure that you're working with a schedule that doesn't take 2 years to build a project. That all has to be identified. And as soon as that's breached, no matter who the contractor is, you need to have discussion. There's got to be conversation. Why are you not meeting this timeline? What are the problems? And you need to sort that out early, because in most cases, what I find 95% of the investors or the clients do, they let it go. They say, okay, he got busy, he got tied up, not knowing that there may be something else behind the scenes. And I can tell you 9 or 10 times there's something else behind the scenes that's going on. As you know.
Yeah, as we've seen.
Right, exactly. And therefore you get in too deep. As an investor right now, where there's that our team is working on 6 that have been sitting for 2.5 years in a bankrupt contractor. They're a mess. I mean, beyond. It will end up costing more, probably 40% to maybe 60% more on each contract to complete these projects for this investor by the time it's all said and done. So they will all be losses. And there was no reason at all for it. New builds that are happening now through our team with this same investor are happening in that less than 120-day basis to get them done, knowing exact cost, no additional overruns unless there's something that was beyond our control, and the issues don't exist.
Well, let's go into this next part here, because I think that'll really kind of hone in all this valuable content that you're bringing up for sure. Okay, Jim, so let's talk about the rescue missions. I know that you're my go-to guy for a lot of things, and we had a client that we recently funded who was working on these luxury properties in beautiful North Carolina, prime area, beautiful properties in that community. And I think he just got over his head. He went to different markets, and because we had funded him in the past and he was successful, he passed the muster, if you will, of our due diligence, but he got in over his head, right? And so when we found out that he was falling apart, this project was on fire, these 2 projects actually. And so just so that the audience can understand, investors that are passive or active alike, so what do you do as an expert when you get a call like this? And let's talk about that rescue mission, because you've turned it into something positive, but it wasn't so pretty when you got there in the beginning.
A good example of those projects. Here you are dealing with $1 million plus houses, whole different scale, and yet the problems are the same. They're just bigger. And in this case, what's happened, the first initial thing when we have boots down and do an evaluation of the project is to immediately meet, whether it be the county or the city or governmental bodies, to establish where we are from an engineering standpoint for approvals. We look at permitting to make sure it's and inspections that they're approved.
Right.
That was the first disaster that we had on those projects in North Carolina, because there were inspections that were failed. But the contractor continued some of the work, scope of work beyond that. And obviously my mindset of that always is, and I've proven this over the years, they're just looking to get down to another draw and not realizing, they know in their mind, sooner or later it's going to catch up to them. In this case, it became a bankruptcy. But unfortunately, now we have to reorganize the job. There were projects that they were actually flip lots, that the county had the lots actually as the wrong construction. So we fixed all that. We got all the permitting in place. We then went through the failed inspections, and we found bar joists, floor bar joists that were problematic. We had to fix them. We had various structural issues that were problems that had to be completed. So we had to go through all that. And fortunately, we developed a relationship with the county that allowed us to still use the original engineered drawings for the project and not have to bring a third-party engineer in to supplement this, knowing that we can bring this project back online to what the original design was. And you're seeing the results of that now, where one that's known as Lot 42 is nearing completion to be done by the end of this month, that we can get through that. But unfortunately, that comes with cost and a lot of stress. So again, it is all about the contractor following the policy, the policy and protocol, and making sure that the client is updated on a regular basis. And today with technology, it could be simply a month update on where you are with permits and inspections. And if you start seeing them failing, know that there's something else maybe going on, because it's either poor management or, in this case, became a bankruptcy.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think another thing that you kind of helped us with, and I think the audience would really appreciate this, because again, you also look at it from a perspective of, okay, we got to solve the issues, but you're also thinking, okay, well, in order for us to justify these additional costs, here's a bankrupt guy. How do we make it so we're protecting the money? You start thinking, how do we make lemonade? And so one of the creative things that I liked is on that particular property, and even so now in the other one, even we have more room. But what I liked, and maybe you can talk about this, is how when you looked at the project, the basement wasn't quite fully finished. In fact, they had a buyer potentially lined up, and they were going to do something absolutely weird about it. So now when that purchaser disappeared, you did some very cost-effective things to increase the square footage of the property and add an additional bathroom, so that ultimately the value of the property increased to justify these additional costs. I think a lot of people don't think like that. So maybe you can talk about how you thought about it and how you put that together, because that was huge.
One of the first things that we looked at with this particular project is what costs were going to be incurred for you in order to finish these projects, that you could remarket them and get them sold. Now all of a sudden you have overruns, you had all these problems. So now we know the costs have escalated over what was anticipated. So now ultimately we do is look at what could we get for the best square footage. These particular homes are beautiful homes built out of a mountainside, and they're walkout basements. So not the typical basement that would be in ground. So they're living space. Ultimately, and with this buyer, that unfortunately a buyer ended up canceling out because of the problems. In this case, they were doing some things that are just not typical for construction, but that was a specialty home buyer who wanted what they wanted. The goal was to look at that lower level and say, we can convert this into living. We could add a bedroom, we could add another family room, or whatever we could add, another full bathroom to increase. In this case, in this particular home, probably raise its value between $80,000 and $100,000. And we made some changes throughout the scopes of work we were doing to really do that work for a minimal cost. So therefore, it allows a recovery for you on what you're putting out in order to get them done, because they were failed projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can attest to the fact that it really did change everything. Another thing you kind of did, which I thought was really smart, again, this is not something you could do on every deal, but because these were two properties that were being built, we restructured the floor plan on the other property, but then you move materials from one house to fit the other so that we can save money. Could you kind of walk us through how you did that? Because that was very creative.
That's a very good point, Rick, because we'll talk about two items. Let's talk about the restructuring of which was Lot 50. the design of that home was not for the best interest of any client that was going to come in there. There was going to be end up not usable space. They would love the house, but as they move in, they're going to find out that this design was flawed. So we looked at each floor plan and modified those changes. Why? Because we had no drywall, we had no wiring at that point, so we revamped the construction, made sure we were compliant, we were fine with all our permitting, which we got approved to do so, and made those construction division modifications in order to make larger areas. Improvements to bedrooms, bathrooms, locations, ingress and egress. All of these things were not thought about. It was really was a poor design in that aspect. But then what we were able to do, on lot 42, there were workmanship problems. There were damages of construction. Never could understand, after somebody being in this 4 decades, why you don't protect your work. Lot 42 in certain areas of the house was into finishes. So they put, as an example, LVP flooring down. They don't protect that and they damage it. So now what happens is we threw away 31% of the floor. We took the remainder floor out, which was new, and we're utilizing that in 50 to reduce that cost so we could do a full replacement at lot 42. So these are all the thoughts into this whole process. You know, I always said that building something, if you have the right intent to construct and build and you're going to do a job, you'll get in and out and you'll have a happy client. When you come into rescue and recovery, that's a whole different operation in more ways than one, because you just can't come in and just say it's going to cost you X to finish this home. You have to have the investor, lender in your case, in mind to say, what can we do throughout this project to reduce those costs, increase square footage, and get you a better sell number so we can control your cost when you go to closing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And what's really cool with that experience is obviously we were able to protect the money. We've increased the value because of the square footage and the quality finish. And even my daughter got a chance to go in there and give some selections and ideas to be a part of the process, which was awesome.
And if I may, I have to tell you, the fireplace is being constructed exactly to your daughter's wishes.
That's awesome.
And it's turned out, it's all framed out. I'll have to send you some photos. It looks great.
Oh, that's amazing. I can't wait to show her. She's going to be so excited. Which leads to another point. This is one of the reasons why we're doing this content. We really want to help our investors to go to the next level. From a perfect example, I'm a lender. And yeah, I'm building, I don't know, a dozen homes with you right now that are in the queue and more coming every week. But as an investor lender, I want to minimize the amount of times that I call you to rescue, when what I could really do is connect with my borrowers and say, what if I give you a turnkey solution? What if I introduce you to my contractor that I trust, that we've done millions of dollars together? He can then help you with your project, and I'm going to feel safer drawing out the money because I know that the project's being done right from the beginning. And so I find that that's one of the biggest value propositions when we decide, rather than doing things on our own, to bring alliances and that we work together so that together we're serving the same customer. You know that by protecting them, you're protecting me. And I know that by bringing them to the table, you're getting more business, and together we grow our business, right? I mean, that's how many of the deals that we're doing now is coming by way of those kind of partnerships.
That is correct, and exactly. The start off of the project is so important, as we all know that whether it's that investor wants to get that home, whether it's going to be a build to hold or it's going to be build to sell, whatever that may be, they want to get moving. They want that job completed. The problem is sometimes there's many errors come with that, and especially starting off, let's talk about just land acquisition and or due diligence through that process, where there may be sanitary, but there's no capacity. There may be water, there's no capacity. I've incurred all of this. Believe me, in some cases, I'm dealing with an investor that spent $1.5 million to overcome a water problem to a development that had a water main sitting in front of it to build duplexes, and there was no capacity. And it wasn't thought about, not even by the engineer that was involved, who got terminated on the project, and we took it over to finish it. So it's a common problem, and it doesn't take a lot of time to do it right. Think about this. You'll save time doing that. Because if you get into rescue recovery, Rick, unfortunately, you've experienced this firsthand for the last several years that this has happened. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So mitigate all that. Do it right coming out so you don't have those problems.
I love that. And it's so true. It's like the old saying that says, measure twice, cut once.
Exactly. Exactly. That's right.
All right, Jim. So now that we kind of set the stage, this has been really valuable. So thank you so much for sharing that insight.
You're welcome.
I think it's going to help a lot of investors to really think twice before they make the wrong call. But going into the current market, obviously we know, and you've been a huge proponent to this, that based on the current market conditions, affordable housing is essential. And so that requires that we find ways to build a quality product, but at the same time at a price that is justifiable so that we can ultimately lower cost and mitigate risk, right? And so that in itself is a challenge. That being said, I was just recently with Josiah, your guy. I'll tell you what, man, so much respect. He is such a sharp kid, knows his stuff, and we got a chance to tour some of these properties that we've been working with you on, and just such a good kid. Now, that said, I know that we've talked about some of the ideas and things that you've been working on for years, has been tied to not only doing traditional construction, but also modular housing. And I think a lot of investors don't understand that. So why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about how you are implementing some of your construction strategies to be able to offer products that ultimately fit the mold of affordable housing, but still quality product?
Modular housing is something that I have been engaged in throughout our businesses for 3 decades. And for affordable housing and full-blown developments all done modularized, to mansions done modularized. And there are companies, manufacturers of modular housing just for that industry. It is a great product. What are the benefits? Built in a controlled environment is number one. Number two, it's speed process because you control cost in this building. And we have found and sustained 10 to 20% savings across the board just in construction, just from that alone. From site work, all the potential risks site are the same, whether it's conventional build or it's modular. So you still need to do your due diligence for that process. Foundations are the same. Except this house is delivered, that's built out in a factory. It comes in where kitchens are in, countertops are in, and it's set in place on top of the same type of stem wall foundation there would be for conventional construction. And the fact of the process and time, it's a time-saving method too. We deal with the elements. No matter where you're building, you deal with the elements of the weather that can affect you, and whatever else may happen with trades that delay because they can't get there for a week or so longer, and now you have these projects that take out 5, 6, 7, 8 months. That isn't what happens. We get a specific date, it's queued on a modular manufacturer, just like the one I mentioned to you that we just recently set. That house came off the line of its construction within 30 days. It went through its quality control, came out to the site, and was set. It was built in 30 days. So that we were ready for. We had foundations ready, so we were ready to go with this project. The savings comes because of the time process. From a quality standpoint, think about this. You're not only building it to the latest standards, like in Florida here, where we have to build it to the stringent regulations of the state of Florida. But beyond that, this has to be built structurally beyond that for transportation, lifting, and put in place. So from its structural standpoint, it's superior. It is a great project. And it is great for affordable housing, for timelines, and efficiency.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And we're so excited about being able to really grow and scale this. You know, I think some of the things that people think when they hear about modular or the traditional construction, they think like a mobile home. And I think that's a very bad misconception of what the actual modular properties look like. I mean, I know maybe you can describe some of the levels of finishes and things that you're able to get while still saving money. I mean, it's still fast, it's affordable, but it looks really, really good.
Clarity to this between manufactured home and modular home is something I want to address because there is, in fact, Rick, this confusion where as soon as you mention modular, as you said, they think mobile home. They are two different type of products. First of all, I must say, manufactured housing today are not the mobile homes of the 70s and 80s anyway. They are built to HUD standards. They themselves are coming out in superior quality product. And in many cases, meet or exceed something to what a modular would even be built, but they're a frame-on installation. They stay on a frame inside of a manufactured home community. An area I have experienced because I've owned manufactured home communities for decades. In this case, modular housing is the type of construction that you would have as the same type of construction of conventional build. Except instead of it going together in pieces in the field, it's done in a controlled environment and then shipped out to the job site. There is no, the theory of, and I know this, I deal with this all the time, and just recently, as soon as they said modular, the first was, yeah, but we're not looking for a mobile home. They're not mobile homes. They don't even call them that anymore. It's called manufactured housing, but it's not that. So we go into explaining what the difference is, and then the points come clear that they truly are getting the same type of home.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one other point I want to bring out, because I've talked to some of my clients when we were first discussing putting this turnkey solution. They were like, Rick, that all sounds great, but like these modular homes don't have garages, they don't have this. And I think that's part of the secret sauce. Like when we work with you with some of these turnkey projects, there is a shell, if you will. That's what they're building in the plant, if you will, developing the things efficiently, fast, and everything else. But there is a process to getting that home on the site, but you're handling everything else as far as from the slab all the way up to the actual final portions, installing the garage door. I mean, it's a house. It is literally a house that you're building that feels and looks like a house, and you're walking into it. And in fact, I would even say maybe even better, because there was one, for example, I was just at a house that you finished. Beautiful home. By the way, 1,300 square foot, I think is what it was. 3 bedroom, 2 bath. You have this beautiful kitchen, as open concept as you can, with obviously a smaller square footage, right? It's not my house, but
Right.
at the same time, you've got some great square footage that you designed that floor plan to maximize the space. But when I took a look at some of the specs for the modular home, same house, 2-car garage, but you have some additional finishes that are included in there, like your 5-inch crown molding throughout. Talk a little bit about like what you're able to also get that's a part of the modular house that improves the quality and the look and feel of the house.
Exactly. Besides the upgrade, and I call this upgrade structurally, that becomes in many cases superior beyond even conventional because of the process of getting it to the site, lifting it with a crane and putting it in place. When you get into finishes, you're right. We have where we would have larger windows. We would do 5-inch base molds, crown moldings. We do ceramic tile on both sides, but we can do full bathroom ceramics. All of these items that we can include as part of a package through on the modular, that we can actually give more for the money, even though that the cost is actually coming to be less. Mm-hmm. Because we look at this and say, well, okay, we know we have this 10% to 20% save across the board. So we could actually give someone more for $1 of what this project is compared to a conventional construction.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, again, a lot of people want to know what are the prices, and again, I do believe depending on the lot completion, there's a lot of variables, but I'll give you an example. There was one project that you were pricing out for me. One of my guys, because it was a client of ours that we brought to the table, he had gotten that same property, same square footage, priced out. I think the price for this 1,350 square foot with about a 400 square foot garage, he was priced out at about $225,000 from his contractor. When you did the analysis, which I love these options, you showed me we were closer to $200,000 for traditional build. But then, and again, that's what we had to work with, so we went with that. But then when you did the analysis on modular, had we had the time to get that approved, I mean, I think the numbers were like 185. It was incredible, like when you really look at the difference. So you've got some additional cost savings, you've got some finishes. And so, for investors that are interested, we just always tell them, hey, before we move forward on looking at funding deals, why don't you come and analyze the opportunities? Maybe there's some other potential ways that we can structure either modular or even some of the prices you do because of volume. They're still very competitive.
That's correct. And you mentioned garages earlier. You may see this footprint come out where the garage is not there, but that's all something we do in the field. So as we come in to do the foundation, stem wall, and preparation of the modular being construction, we're also doing footer foundation and preparation for the garage as well. So once the modular is set, we build a garage. The garage will be conventionally built. It's just the garage. Although they could be bought panelized and sent and just assembled in panels, we don't do that. That's something that we feel we have better control of to do with our own team to assemble a garage. When it's all done, it's the same. It is the actually appearance aesthetically looks the same. And then on the modular side, where you end up getting your water, your sewer, all of the same process, you get all that ready just awaiting the home. Because when the time that the home hits the site, you could be done within 30 to 35 days and ready for CO.
Yeah, that's incredible. And for investors that are borrowing, right, you're leveraging because most people don't have the resources. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about that, and then I'll discuss the funding side. And the reason why I want to kind of hit this is because I think one of the reasons why so many investors, again, you've been doing this for 30 years, right? But I can assure you that most investors don't know that they can leverage a traditional build by using modular and get a better price, get the speed that you mentioned, which is faster. And the reason why I think is because up until not just recently, there really isn't a financing product in place that investors can go to get the money to do the deal, right? Because most of the people you worked with, they were already self-funded institutions, right? I mean, maybe talk a little bit about that.
That's correct, yes. First of all, the modular industry, just in 2024, has increased tremendously. It's incredible. That industry is picking up momentum every year because it's known now what this process is all about. Carrying cost. And that's one of the things I always say to an investor right away. Look at the overall carrying cost of the process to go through conventional build in relation to modular. That in itself is a significant savings. We don't look at that. We work on construction cost, what it's going to take to build a project, and that end cost. But behind that scene are those carrying costs that you have to deal with. So if we could reduce that through the process, like the one you mentioned was, say, $15,000 or $20,000 less going modular compared to conventional, that wasn't going to be the only save, because their carrying costs were going to reduce too, because of the timelines.
Well, that's a really good point. I mean, even the quote for the initial project for that, to give perspective, when he was analyzing the deal for funding, before we kind of introduced him to you, he was looking at 6 to 8 months on that build. When you can drop that to 3 months, that makes a massive difference in your cost savings on a monthly basis for mortgage payments, carrying costs, and even utilities once you get out there. So I think you're right. Now, funding isn't really traditionally available for modular, which is why you and I have collaborated so much to come up with some resources to help investors do that. Now, I got to say, because I know people will reach out to us, I don't have unlimited resources, but we have enough to really scale and grow the business. But I believe that's one of the reasons why people didn't even know about this, right? Because funding just isn't as popular or even known in the modular space.
Exactly. Although it's available, but it's a different process, because you're not going through stage draws that you would have in a conventional build. You would have it where the manufacturer may have to, they'd ask you to escrow that fund of what that house is going to be. Once the house is set and you do your own quality control inspection of it, those funds get released. So it's a little bit of a different process, and sends you off to certain type of lending institutes, in this case, your firm, to be able to do that. And you have devised a way that's going to be perfect to work for that process for modular construction.
Yeah, we're super excited. I mean, I just feel like, again, we're adding value to clients, we're protecting their investment, and by default, protecting us.
Of course,
and
yes.
just having a nice circle. Why don't we now transition? So we talked about the process. We're doing single family homes. We're doing your traditional. In fact, we're even looking at a potential $3 million project right now. So I'm excited about that too. But let's dive into another product that a lot of investors are really interested in, because I know that we've been working through that, and I just toured a few properties. All right, so Jim, why don't we go into, one of the things, in fact, I just toured a few of the properties that you were working on in Lakeland, and that is duplexes. I know that in this particular market, there's a major need for affordable housing, and many municipalities and even cities are making exceptions for some of the lots that were basically rated an R1. So it would be a single family dwelling, where now they're changing the rules to allow, if it fits, that you could put a duplex. And that's a game changer for investors as a whole. We're excited. We're definitely doubling down. I know you're looking at 2 lots right now when you got here that we're interested in doing 2 duplexes, right? Because it makes sense. But when I say duplex, once again, there's a misconception in the industry that you have these really cheap, crappy properties, and there are these ghetto units that you're going to rent for affordable. But as I toured the property, and hopefully our guy will roll some of this, B-roll to show it. I mean, brand new construction, 2-car garages. I mean, these are really nice units. Why don't you talk about that? Because it was your team that constructed those.
The construction process, engineering process of these duplexes are no different than a single family conventional home. And in fact, when you talk about marriage walls where they connect together, there's fire rating that goes right up to the roof area. So there is that protection of that design. And believe me, in the counties or cities, all that we work in, that is a very specific detail that's provided. So it gives safety to each side of this home. So there's nothing cheap about this in any aspect. As far as from its quality, we built them through luxury, high-end duplexes, high-end fourplexes, all different sizes that we've done this. And yes, it is becoming more known because we have cities and counties now that are saying, listen, we don't have a problem. We would entertain that. We will let you put a duplex. Or in that particular site that you toured, there was 1 building there at one point. We have 4 units on that parcel of land. So we were able to do that in that particular case. Or if we look at the Spirit Lake project, which is in Winter Haven, there's a unique project that I was involved in the conceptual design with the investor, that we turned that into 35 townhouses. But not only that they're just townhouses, they are platted separately. That means each home will be sold individually. So there'll be 35 independent sales. So it's not something that would be, say, you have to take this on as a rental property, although you could own one building or one unit. You could buy to hold, you can buy to sell, or you can buy all of them. It does not really matter because we separated that, and we are already through the approval process with the county. So duplexes, there should be never be any fear of the construction quality of them. They're absolutely not for safety, and they are nice units. It all comes down to finishes, as you've seen on the duplexes that you visited.
Yeah, 100%. And maybe we can just dive into that a little bit. You know, I had my guy who was driving with us in the day in the life kind of video, and I said, now this is what the traditional duplex look like. Pull over. So we drove by the neighborhood where there's a lot of duplexes, and you see these ugly properties. There's literally no garage, so there's cars everywhere. And then when we pulled into the unit, it was like, oh, wait a minute, these are like townhomes, right? You've got your 2-car garage. There's even actually a storage space in the garage so that you can put things in there and keep it neat. Maybe just walk us through just one side of that unit. Just kind of describe like the square footage, you know, what you did for the flooring, the kitchen, the bathroom, just so they can understand. And I'll have them play some of the B-roll on the back end too.
Well, the whole idea of duplexes, and just like the ones you're indicating there are in this particular development area, that was the concept of duplexes. You know, it's almost like the whole theory that mobile homes are modular, which they're not. You know, and that's the problem. Duplexes, they thought about this, were just this cheap constructed building. In the case of these duplexes, we built them with 2-car garages, not single car. Why? To allow for more storage, and or if they have 2 vehicles. We provided a designated storage area within the garage. We put the HVAC units also within the garage for easy serviceability. That even if that person's working and they have to have somebody come in, they can go in through a garage door keypad and not have to go into home to service it, or if there's a mechanical failure. And then on the interior, we use the same type of open floor concept that we do in single family dwellings. It's, you know, open living room, dining room areas, kitchens with snack bars, tile floors, which you can do ceramic. In those cases, they have LVP in, ceramic tile bathrooms, you know, 5-inch moldings, 6-panel doors. All of these upgrades that we have, and the square footage on those units are a little under 1,200 square feet when you look at them. Now, one of the things we do with our duplexes, we built them with 9'4" wall to give more volume. So as you walk in there, you get that bigger feeling. But in actuality, that home was under 1,200 square feet and very usable, being a 3-bedroom, 2-bath.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. And you know, we fund a lot of flips, for example. They're going to basically either flip them or turn them into a rental property. And you see the upgraded kitchens that they do, and they're okay. But a lot of them have like Formica countertops, because again, they're going cheaper because they may have to hold and rent it. What I notice in these projects, you have granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, even soft close cabinets, right? Which is not normal. So like you really treated it like a luxury property. And so the property has character, it's nice, it feels modern. And that's a great product.
This investor that we did this for is a Philadelphia-based investor, and the whole concept was into his duplexes was to buy hold, but buy hold for a certain time. In 7 years, Dan's the kind of guy that he wants out, he wants to move on to the next thing. The idea of our design of these was all those features you added, that when it comes to the sell side, it's there and you're not looking at renovations. Let's talk about those costs now. Even the roof. I mean, that has the best of roofs that's on there. It's a 35-year roof, best quality. It's a timber roof that's on there. We do all of that for the sake of that resale. So you look at the project for resale. You know it's going to be buy, hold, or rent for now for 7, then sell, but we take that into consideration. If you didn't use granite countertops, you're going to be replacing them. They're rental units. So there would have to be total destruction in order for those granite countertops to have to be replaced. So taking that into consideration now, why do we put self-closing doors in the kitchen? So the kitchen cabinets, it prevents damage in essence. It's better to do that now. So that's all taken into consideration through the design process. I
love it. And that's such a great product that investors really need to tap into, because like you said, you can consider the exit in the future, or you can then hold them in cash flow. So what the beautiful thing is, if the market is adjusting and people aren't aware, you still have multiple options as an investor that really make sense for them and for us as the lender. And obviously, the more volume you have, the more you can control cost and the speed of execution.
And also what we do is that and we take a lot of information from the people that then go through these units for the sake of renting. If they have something that they'll push back on and say, I wish this had this, we take that under advisement, and that model has been modified 5 times. And it's back on the drawing table again for some further modifications. We take that into consideration too. And changes that we're making now are not really going to change cost. So it's amazing how the input of, in this case, a tenant, okay, or it would be a buyer, that can give you to even make a better floor plan. So it's got to be constantly in real time and in progress through the process, because it just makes for a better job.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So, Jim, we've talked about a good amount of information that I think investors are probably, their brains are going, wait a minute, I really need to tap into this. But you don't just exclusively work with us. You obviously have other clients that come in. My question to you, just so that investors see, our philosophy has been, if I'm a lender, I want to add value to everyone that I work with. Why? Because number one, by offering a service that goes beyond my lending capacity, what it does, it builds relationships and partnerships that do a lot of a repeat business. So when I say I'm a lender, people are like, isn't that market crowded? Well, I don't have the same competition because I'm providing a full ecosystem. Investors that borrow from me are not just thinking about my rates and terms. They're thinking about, man, I'm tapping into Rick's contacts. I get access to Jim or the Desmonds that bring inventory or the team that sells properties. I try to create an ecosystem that is fully turnkey. And that way everyone involved benefits from the partnership. And so for that reason, we do more and more business together, right? And so what I'm curious is, since you've already worked with other clients that are kind of trying to figure their way, maybe you can talk to how this turnkey system works, or do you find that other systems work better?
No, actually, your system's going to work the best, because I'm already in conversation with other investors that I'm have contact with you for this. And it's been one of the areas that's kind of been a problem, even on the modular side of it, is that they don't have that funding vehicle, so to speak, that could help them take it to that next step. So it becomes a little bit more complicated for them, and they push back from it because they don't have that. What you're offering, Rick, is the ultimate answer to how you can go through this, whether it be that single family, affordable, modular, whether it be duplex. That funding vehicle that you have is the answer to success. Not only has working for us, it is the only time that I've done it throughout all my years. And it's the answer. In fact, we talked about this weeks ago when I said it was something that was always a mindset, to find somebody that would do exactly what you're doing to make that stage finance process that will make this work. And I have investors that are ready to participate in this.
I love it. That's awesome. And it's, again, it's that ecosystem. When we work together, it's amazing what can be accomplished, right? Because
Absolutely.
we're not by ourselves. I get to tap into your superpower. By no means am I a builder, right? So if I'm trying to do this on my own, I got some major issues. And so it's just so much easier to work with trusted people that you can go deep instead of wide.
Exactly.
Jim, as we're wrapping this up, obviously, this has been a really good interview. I really appreciate it. And one thing that I want to ask you is, again, we're dealing with active and we're dealing with passive investors, whether they're putting their money to work or they're working the deal. After all of these years that you've been doing this business, if you had to really condense things down to like one main principle, what would be some advice that you would offer these types of investors?
Importantly, coming out of the gate of the land acquisition is that they understand that parcel. They do a better due diligence to understand what they can build. Are there restrictions to this parcel? I mean, even down to trees as an example. We're dealing with one now that's we have to go relocate trees and plant them somewhere else in order to build a house. That's costing thousands of dollars. Plan that out, that strategic plan at the very beginning. Land, capacities of sewer and water, electricity. I have one parcel right now, the developer's going to spend $32,000 to get power to his lot in order to build a house. So I refuse to build the project because I'm not going to let him spend $32,000. If he finds somebody else, that's fine. But what could happen is coming out of the gate, doing that due diligence, understanding that lot, working with the contractor on the design, understand the area and what size home, know what value is going to be at the time of sale. Look at the cost that you could afford to make this aesthetically look nice, give it great curb appeal, but stay within budget. So at the end of the project, you reap the benefits financially and you're not at a loss of the project. So it's just a matter of planning is the whole process to this.
I love that. So for investors that are considering doing this, rather than walking into a landmine, take the time first to understand what you're getting into before you ultimately pull the trigger.
Correct, because it doesn't take a lot of time. Sometimes I find with investors that they're impatient, that they want to get this done, and I understand that process. But then I feel for them once we have to break this news to them and say, we have a real problem, and then to deal with that. So take the time, put that initial effort. It only adds a couple more weeks to the process, and you'll have a much better project with better profitability.
I love that. Great words of wisdom. So Jim, it's been so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing this incredible, valuable information. As we wrap this up, I know there's going to be a lot of clients that want to learn how they can work with us, right? Or work directly with, you know, the construction and the great work that you do. Would you explain a little bit about that process as far as how people can ultimately start working with you?
You start off by whether you own a lot or you are looking to acquire a lot. Understand that lot, what can be built on that lot, then start looking at design, approve those design concepts, prepare budgets. That's stuff that we can do, put all these budget numbers together, making sure it's within the alignment of what you're looking for. And then once you have all that, you now know that you have your fail safes, so where this project's gonna come in, then hand it back off, Rick, to your team for the purpose of its funding process.
I love that. And so maybe one of the things that we can do for those that are interested, Jim, is as well, if you don't have a lot, again, part of our ecosystem is we have specialists that market and get, you know, direct opportunities. So working with people that know the criteria is a huge deal. So, you know, we like to also potentially pre-qualify investors as well, right? So if you need capital for these deals, having a consultation with one of our private investors is essential because we can identify what your budget's going to look like and what you can afford to invest in. From that step, then it's a lot easier to connect with. We'll connect you with Jim so that he can look at the land, give you the green light, and you guys come up with a budgetary number so that we can move forward, and then we'll fund it and get it going. Yeah, that makes sense?
That's it. That's the process.
I love it.
Makes for a better job.
Yes, absolutely. Well, hey guys, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and hopefully we've shown you some really interesting things that can help you grow your business while mitigating risk. If you have any questions, again, reach out to us, and until next time, invest with purpose. I hope you've enjoyed the content that we shared with you, and again, if this is something that you feel has been a blessing to you, please do me a favor, share it, like it, subscribe, and if you want to watch some of the other content, don't forget to click on the next video coming up.